She had grown up on the wide and open ranch lands of her family's estate, yet Elena Hartley often felt like a stranger in her own world. People in town knew her as the wealthy ranch heiress, the girl whose family had owned Hartley Ridge for generations. But behind the grand house, the long fences and the endless fields, she carried a quiet fear that she tried her whole life to hide. Doctors had told her she was unlikely ever to have children. The news had settled inside her like a heavy stone. She did not cry in front of anyone, not even her closest friends. She simply built a wall around that part of her heart and pretended it did not matter. Years passed, and Elena threw herself into work. She learned to manage the ranch, ride horses better than most cowboys, and even studied business so she could take care of what would one day be hers. People admired her for being calm, strong, and unbothered. Only she knew how many nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what kind of life she would have if she could never build a family of her own. Life stayed that way until the season the drought nearly ruined everything. The land was dry, the wells were failing, and the cattle were growing thin. The workers did all they could, but the water supply under the east pasture had dropped so low that everyone feared it would give out completely. That was when the ranch manager suggested hiring outside help, someone young, hard-working, and willing to take on the dangerous job of clearing the clogged underground channels that fed their well, and that was how the cowboy came to Hartley Ridge. His name was Luke Dawson. He was not from the wealthy families nearby, nor did he have any special connections. He grew up poor on the outskirts of another county, working odd jobs to support himself. He arrived at the ranch with a small bag, rough boots, and a calm way of speaking that made people trust him without quite knowing why. Word had spread that he was good at restoring damaged water lines on farmland, even the deep, blocked ones that others refused to try. Elena first saw him from the porch. He was walking beside the ranch manager, listening carefully as he was shown the dry fields. He was tall, sun-browned, and quiet. He didn't look around with admiration or fear, as many workers did the first time they saw the massive Hartley property. Instead, he took everything in with simple focus, as if the land were speaking to him. Elena did not know why she watched him for so long. Maybe it was because there was something peaceful about the way he moved. Maybe it was because he didn't stare at the house or the fences or the expensive equipment. He just noticed the land. Or maybe it was because for the first time in a long while she felt the wall around her heart shift, even if just a little. Later that afternoon, the foreman brought Luke to meet her. She expected him to be shy or overly polite, the way many people acted around her because of her family name. Instead, he nodded to her with steady eyes. "Ma'am, I hear your well is blocked. I can go in deep and clear out the passage, but it'll take a day or two. It's not an easy job." Elena didn't know why the simple honesty of his voice made her feel something warm. She found herself nodding slowly. "We need the water back," she said. "If you can do it, we're grateful. But please be careful. The channel is narrow and the lower parts haven't been checked in years." He gave a small half-smile. "I'll manage. I've handled worse." A breeze passed through the yard, carrying dust and the faint smell of dry earth. For a moment, Elena felt strangely aware of the silence around them. She cleared her throat and forced herself back to her usual calm tone. "I'll have someone show you the equipment shed." "Thank you," he said simply. Then he followed the foreman toward the old barn. That night, Elena walked the edges of the ranch as she often did when she couldn't sleep. The moon was bright, casting long silver shadows across the dry grass. She thought about the risk Luke was taking. The underground channel was deep, narrow, and filled with old roots and mud. Most workers had refused to try clearing it, but he had accepted without hesitation, even though he looked like someone who had already carried heavy burdens in life. She paused near the old well. The wooden frame looked worn, but strong. This well had been the heart of the ranch for decades. Her father used to tell her stories about how his grandparents dug it by hand. Now it stood dry at the bottom, waiting for someone brave enough to fix what time had damaged. She suddenly realized she trusted Luke more than she understood. Trust was not something she gave easily. Maybe it was because he seemed untouched by pride or fear. Maybe it was because he did not treat her as someone fragile or important, just another person trying to save her land. Or maybe it was because he seemed to hold his own share of quiet sadness behind his steady eyes. The next morning, the ranch was alive with activity. Workers prepared tools, measured ropes, and readied safety equipment. Elena came outside to check the progress and found Luke standing near the well, sleeves rolled up, studying a map of the underground channel. The early light fell across his face, showing determination rather than worry. When he saw her, he nodded respectfully. "I'm going in today. If I can reach the blockage, I'll clear it out and drain the mud. Once it flows, your water should come back." "You're certain it's safe enough?" she asked. He gave another small smile. "Nothing out here is ever fully safe, but I know what I'm doing." Elena looked at him more closely. There was something steady about him, something that made her feel calmer than she should have been. As he put on the protective gear and prepared for the descent, she felt her heartbeat pick up, not from fear alone, but from something she could not yet name. The workers lowered him slowly into the well. Elena stood near the edge, gripping the wooden frame. The ropes creaked, dust drifted through the sunlight, and the sound of his boots against the stone walls echoed faintly. "Almost at the first level," he called up. His voice sounded far away but confident. Minutes passed, then half an hour, then an hour. Elena waited the entire time, refusing to leave. Every worker could see the tension in her shoulders, but no one commented. The foreman kept giving updates, but she did not take her eyes from the well. At last, they heard his voice again, loud, breathless, but triumphant. "I found the blockage, and I cleared it!" Workers cheered. Elena felt her chest loosen for the first time in weeks. But what truly struck her was what he said next. When they had finally pulled him back up, covered in mud and dirt, but smiling through exhaustion. "It's done. The water will return. I confirmed it down there when I went in deep and drained the last of the mud. Your well is alive again." For a long moment, Elena just stared at him, not because of his words, but because of the truth behind them. In that one moment, she realized something she had not expected. She trusted him. She believed in him. And for the first time in years, she felt a small, fragile hope inside her chest, like the first drop of water after a long drought. She did not say anything aloud, but inside her heart, she whispered something she had never admitted before. "Maybe I am not as alone as I thought." She looked at Luke again, and he met her gaze, not as a ranch heiress, not as someone untouchable, but simply as a person standing beside another. And without knowing why, Elena felt her guarded world begin to shift. The days after the well was cleared felt different on Hartley Ridge. Water started flowing again through the pipes, the troughs were filled, and the cattle looked calmer. Workers moved with lighter steps, relieved to see the ranch recover from the drought. But even with all the changes around her, Elena felt that the biggest change rested quietly inside her heart. She found herself thinking about Luke more than she expected. She tried to push the thoughts away, telling herself it was only because he had saved the ranch during a difficult time. But deep down, she knew it was something more. There was something about him. His calm voice, his steady eyes, his quiet confidence, that stayed with her long after he finished his work. One morning, Elena walked toward the barn to check on the equipment repairs. As she approached, she saw Luke working alone near the tool bench. The early sun made dust shimmer around him like small golden sparks. He was fixing one of the old water pumps, his hands moving with quiet skill. The pump had been broken for years, long before he arrived. She paused for a moment, watching him without meaning to. There was something peaceful about the way he focused completely on whatever he was doing. He did not rush, he did not complain. He simply worked, as if each task deserved respect and patience. When he finally noticed her, he wiped his hands on a cloth and nodded politely. "Morning, ma'am." "You don't have to call me ma'am," Elena said gently. "You can just call me Elena." He hesitated, as if unsure whether it was proper. Then he gave a slight smile. "Morning, Elena." The sound of her name in his voice made her feel warm, though she forced herself to stay calm. She stepped closer, looking at the pump he was repairing. "You're still working? I thought you finished your job here." "The well is flowing now," he said, tightening a screw. "But there's still maintenance to do. If the pumps fail, the water won't travel to all the pastures. I figured I'd help out while I'm here." "You don't owe us anything more," she said softly. He looked up at her, his brown eyes steady. "I know. But you treated me with respect from the moment I arrived. Not everyone does, so I want to help where I can." Elena was quiet for a moment. "You've helped more than you know." He nodded slightly, then returned his attention to the pump. The ranch was still waking up around them. Horses neighing in the stables, workers gathering for the morning briefing, dogs barking in the distance. But in that small corner of the barn, it felt like the world had paused. Trying to break the silence, she asked, "How long have you been doing this kind of work?" He paused, thinking. "A long time. I started when I was a kid, helping my uncle repair farm machines. After he passed away, I worked wherever people needed me. Some jobs were small, some were dangerous. But it kept me going." There was a brief heaviness in his voice when he spoke about his past, but he pushed through it with quiet strength. Elena found herself wanting to know more, but she didn't want to push him. "And do you plan to stay in this area?" she asked. Luke shrugged lightly. "I haven't decided yet. I move where the work takes me." His words made her heart sink just a little. She didn't know why she wanted him to stay, but the feeling surprised her with its sharpness. Before she could answer, the ranch manager approached, calling her name. She nodded to Luke and walked away, but she felt his gaze following her for a moment. And strangely, she wished she hadn't been called away so soon. Later that afternoon, Elena stood near the horse paddock, watching the animals run. Wind brushed her hair back, carrying the smell of fresh grass and damp earth. For the first time in weeks, the fields were green again. The water flowing through the irrigation lines had revived everything. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Luke approaching quietly. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not at all." They both leaned on the wooden fence, watching the horses in silence. One of the mares, a brown and white beauty named Willow, trotted closer. She was known for being shy around most people, but she came right up to Elena and nudged her gently. Luke smiled. "She likes you." "She's usually nervous around new people," Elena said, petting the mare's neck. "It took weeks just to get her comfortable." To her surprise, Willow turned toward Luke and sniffed his hand. He let her, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle her. "She's got kind eyes," he said softly. "Like you," Elena said, before she could stop herself. The words slipped out so naturally that she froze. Her heart jumped, unsure how he would react. Luke looked at her quietly, not with surprise, but with something gentler, something that made her pulse quicken. He didn't say anything at first. He just turned his gaze back to the mare as if giving her space to breathe. "You see things in people others don't," he finally said. "It's a rare thing." Her cheeks grew warm, but she didn't look away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. But the silence didn't feel awkward. It felt calm, almost comforting. Finally, Luke cleared his throat softly. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For staying by the well when I was working. Most people would have gone back inside, but you stayed. It meant something." Elena felt her heart soften. "I was worried. The channel is deep and dangerous. I didn't want anything to happen to you." He smiled again, just a small, quiet curve of his lips that carried more emotion than a long speech. "I knew you were up there," he said, "and somehow it made the work easier." Her breath caught at his honesty. She did not know what to say, so she simply looked back at the fields, hoping the wind would hide the warmth spreading through her. Over the next few days, they crossed paths often. Sometimes by accident, sometimes because Elena found herself walking toward places she knew he might be working. They talked about small things at first, the weather, the land, the animals. But slowly, their conversations grew deeper. She learned that Luke had spent most of his life working from ranch to ranch, saving what little money he earned. He never complained about hardships. He never spoke bitterly about the past. Instead, he talked about simple dreams, owning a small piece of land someday, raising a few horses, living a quiet life. Elena found herself listening to him with a softness she rarely showed anyone. In return, Luke learned things about her too. How she worked tirelessly to protect her family's land. How she feared failing the people who depended on her. How she carried a quiet worry she never shared. More than once, Luke looked at her with a knowing expression, as if he understood her burdens without needing them explained. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in warm orange colors, Elena found Luke fixing the fence near the west pasture. "Another long day?" she asked, walking toward him. "A good one," he replied. "The fence is stubborn, but it's holding." She leaned against the wooden post beside him. The air was cool, and the crickets had begun their nightly song. "Luke," she said quietly, "have you ever felt uncertain about your future? Like no matter how hard you try, something important might always be missing?" He paused, studying her face with gentle eyes. "I think everyone feels that way at some point," he said, "but you don't have to carry everything alone." She swallowed, the words striking deeper than she expected. No one had ever said that to her before. Not like this, not with such honest care. "When you fixed the well," she said softly, "you didn't just bring back the water. You brought hope back to this place." He looked down at his hands for a moment, then back at her. "And you brought something back for me, too." "What do you mean?" she whispered. He took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. "For a long time, I've felt like I was moving without direction. But since I came here, I feel steadier, like I'm finally where I'm meant to be." Her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what this feeling was exactly. Fear, hope, joy, but it wrapped around her gently. The wind carried a soft rustling sound through the grass. The sky grew darker, stars beginning to appear. Luke set down his tools and stood beside her, close enough that she felt the quiet warmth of his presence. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. But for the first time in years, Elena felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. She felt safe. She felt seen. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the quiet beginning of something she didn't dare name yet, something that felt like the fragile start of connection, slowly unfolding between two hearts that had spent too long in silence. The morning after the quiet moment by the fence, Elena woke with a strange feeling in her chest, something warm, steady, and unfamiliar. She tried to tell herself it was nothing more than gratitude for Luke's hard work. But every time she thought of his calm eyes, his gentle voice, or the way he listened to her without judgment, her heart fluttered in a way she could not deny. She dressed early and stepped outside before most of the workers were awake. The sky was still soft with morning light, painted in pale shades of pink and gold. Dew clung to the grass, making the entire ranch sparkle like a field of tiny diamonds. Elena breathed in the fresh air, letting it calm her restless thoughts. As she walked toward the barns, she heard laughter coming from the direction of the horse paddock. It wasn't loud, just the kind of warm laughter that slipped out naturally. Curious, she followed the sound. She found Luke brushing Willow, the once shy mare who rarely let anyone get close. The horse stood peacefully beside him, leaning her head into his shoulder as if he were a lifelong friend. Luke chuckled softly as Willow nudged him again. "You're getting spoiled," he told the mare. "But I guess you earned it." Elena smiled without meaning to. Something about the scene felt gentle and comforting. Luke turned when he sensed her nearby. His smile grew a little wider, not overly bright, not forced, just warm. "Morning, Elena," he said. "Good morning," she replied. "You're up early." He shrugged lightly. "Couldn't sleep much. Thought I'd come check on Willow." "She looks happy," Elena said, stepping closer. "She's a soft-hearted one," Luke replied, rubbing the mare's neck. "Just needed someone to see her." Elena felt those words touch her more deeply than she wanted to admit. She wondered if Luke realized how his kindness reached not just animals but people too. For a moment they simply stood there, side by side, watching Willow flick her tail lazily. The world around them felt quiet and peaceful, almost as if the ranch was giving them a moment to breathe. After a while, Luke glanced at Elena. "You look thoughtful." "I was just remembering things," she answered honestly. "Good things or heavy things?" She looked down at her hands. "A bit of both." He nodded without pushing her to explain. She appreciated that about him. He never forced her to reveal more than she wanted to. Instead, he waited patiently, offering a space she could step into if she chose. She cleared her throat. "Luke, I wanted to ask you something." "I'm listening." "Have you ever felt like you were expected to be strong all the time, even when you're tired? Even when you feel like things inside you are breaking?" Luke rested the brush on the fence and leaned against it, thinking. His expression softened. "All my life," he said quietly. "People expect strength from those who work with land and animals. They expect you to endure everything without showing weakness." "Exactly," she whispered. He looked at her gently. "But strength doesn't mean ignoring what hurts. Sometimes real strength is being honest about it." Elena felt her throat tighten. "I'm not very good at that." "You're better than you think." The simplicity of his words hit her harder than she expected. She blinked away the sting in her eyes and smiled faintly. "Thank you, Luke." He gave a small nod, as if to say he understood more than she said aloud. Later in the day, Elena gathered the workers for a meeting. She needed to plan repairs for the north fence and discuss the coming winter. But during the meeting, she noticed Luke watching her quietly from the side. He stood with his arms crossed, listening to her instructions with respect and focus. It made her feel strangely grounded, as if his presence supported her in ways no one else had. Once the meeting ended, the workers scattered to their tasks. Luke approached her. "You're a good leader," he said simply. Elena raised an eyebrow. "You think so?" "I know so," he replied. "You're firm when you need to be, gentle when it matters, and fair always. That's more than a lot of leaders can say." She felt warmth rise in her chest. "You notice a lot." "I try to," he said with a small smile. "It helps me understand people." Elena thought about how he always seemed to know when she was worried, even if she didn't say a word. It both comforted and unsettled her, but in a good way. "Are you staying for lunch?" she asked. "If I'm invited," he answered lightly. "You are." They walked toward the ranch house together. The wind rustled the tall grass beside them, and Elena found her hand brushing against Luke's by accident. She pulled it back quickly, her heart jumping. Luke didn't say a word, but she saw his lips curve slightly, as if he had felt the same small shock. Lunch was simple: bread, roasted vegetables, and stew. Elena sat across from Luke at the long wooden table. The workers chatted loudly around them, but somehow the noise seemed to fade into the background. Luke ate quietly, but not awkwardly. He looked comfortable in the busy atmosphere, even though he didn't belong to the wealthy world of Hartley Ridge. Something about him blended easily with people from any background. After a while, Elena asked, "Do you ever miss having a place of your own?" Luke paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Sometimes," he said. "I've moved so much that I got used to not settling anywhere. But it would be nice someday to wake up knowing the land outside is mine. To build something with my own hands." Elena studied him. "Would you ever want to settle at a ranch like this?" He looked thoughtful. "A place like this? It's beautiful. But it belongs to a strong family. I'm just passing through." His words struck her unexpectedly hard. She realized she didn't want him to think of himself as temporary, not here, not in her life. But she didn't know how to say that without revealing too much too soon. She tried to speak lightly. "You never know. Sometimes the places we think are temporary become the places that matter the most." When she said that, Luke's eyes lingered on hers for a long moment. A quiet understanding passed between them, soft, gentle, but very real. That evening, Elena left the ranch office later than usual. The sky was dark blue, sprinkled with early stars. As she walked toward the house, she saw a small light near the east pasture. Curious, she followed it. She found Luke holding a lantern, repairing a section of wire fence. "You're still working?" she asked, surprised. He straightened and smiled. "The wind today loosened the corner post. If I leave it like this, it'll fall by morning." "You should rest," she said. "So should you," he replied gently. "But you're still out here too." She couldn't argue with that. She stepped closer and watched him tighten the wire. "Luke," she said softly, "why do you work so hard for a ranch that isn't yours?" He paused and looked up at her. The lantern light flickered across his face, highlighting the honest emotion in his eyes. "Because this place gave me more peace in a few days than most places gave me in years," he said. "Because I feel needed here. Because—" He hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "Because someone here makes me want to stay." Elena's heart skipped a beat. She opened her mouth to speak, but couldn't find the words. Luke stepped back from the fence and rested his hands on his hips. His voice softened. "You don't have to answer," he said. "I just wanted you to know." The wind blew between them, carrying the faint smell of grass and soil. Elena felt something inside her settle, something that had been restless for years. She took a slow breath. "Luke, you're not the only one who feels that way." He looked at her, surprise flickering briefly in his eyes before turning into something warmer, something hopeful. They stood there under the quiet glow of the lantern, the fence between them, but their hearts closer than they had ever been. For the first time, neither of them tried to hide their feelings. And the night around them seemed to hold its breath, as if even the land itself understood that something important had begun, something gentle, something real, something that neither of them had expected to find on a ranch lost in the quiet countryside, something that felt like the slow beginning of love. The days following the lantern-lit confession became a time of slow, quiet change on Hartley Ridge. Neither Elena nor Luke rushed anything, yet the air between them felt warmer, gentler, and full of unspoken understanding. They continued their daily tasks as usual, But now, even the smallest moment carried a softness neither of them could deny. Elena began noticing things she hadn't before. She noticed how Luke pushed his hair back when he was focused. She noticed how he always helped others before helping himself. She noticed how he treated the ranch animals with the same care he showed her when she felt uncertain. She noticed how his presence made the world around her feel less heavy. And Luke noticed things too. He noticed the way Elena touched the horses with a feather-light hand, how she paused before making decisions, because she wanted to choose the right path for everyone, and how her eyes filled with quiet strength even when she doubted herself. He noticed that she carried worries deep inside her, and he admired her bravery in holding the ranch together while silently carrying her own burdens. Yet even with this newfound closeness, both of them sensed something lingering, an invisible wall neither had dared to name. A gentle bond had formed, but both were still afraid of saying too much too soon. Their feelings grew quietly, like small roots beneath the soil, waiting for the right moment to bloom. One afternoon, Elena stood outside the ranch house reviewing a stack of papers. Winter was coming, and she needed to finalize orders for hay, plan the feeding schedule, and double-check the supplies for the cold months. She frowned slightly. Some of the numbers didn't add up, and a few deliveries were running late. Luke walked by and immediately noticed her worried expression. "You look troubled," he said, stopping beside her. Elena sighed and lowered the papers. "Just winter preparations. Some orders didn't arrive, and the costs are higher than usual. We'll manage, but it's stressful." Luke's voice was calm. "Is there anything I can help with?" "You already do so much," she replied. "I don't want to add more to your workload." He gave her a small smile. "Helping you doesn't feel like work." His words were simple, but they reached her heart with surprising force. She felt her cheeks warm, and she quickly looked back at the papers to hide the gentle smile forming on her lips. "Well, maybe you can look at the supply shed with me. I need to check if we have enough rope, tools, and feed buckets." "Of course." They walked together toward the supply shed behind the barns. The clouds above were thick and gray, hinting at early winter rain. A cool wind brushed through the grass, carrying the smell of damp soil and distant pine trees. Inside the shed, Elena set the papers down while Luke examined the shelves. The quiet room felt peaceful, filled with the soft echo of their movements. Luke checked every corner carefully, counting items and cross-checking them with the list. "You're missing a few things," he said after a moment, "but most of the supplies are still in good shape." Elena nodded. "That's a relief." She turned back to collect her papers, but her hand brushed Luke's as she reached for them. The touch was brief, accidental, but enough to make both of them pause for a heartbeat. Elena quickly drew her hand back, feeling her heart race. Luke stepped back too, giving her space, but his gentle eyes told her he wasn't upset, just caught by surprise. "I'm sorry," she said awkwardly. "There's nothing to be sorry for," he replied softly. She felt the quiet emotion behind his words, and her breath caught. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the silence full and warm. Then Luke broke it gently. "Elena, can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. "What worries you the most?" "Not about the ranch, about you." Her heart tightened. No one had ever asked her that. People asked her about the ranch, the workers, the cattle, the finances. But no one asked about her. She swallowed. "I suppose I worry about failing. Not the ranch, my family. My father trusted me to look after this place. Everyone depends on me to make the right decisions. Sometimes I feel like I'm holding everything together with threads." Luke stepped closer, not too close, but close enough that she felt supported. "You don't have to pretend you're strong all the time," he said gently. "You're allowed to be human. You're allowed to feel overwhelmed." Elena looked away, her eyes stinging slightly. I'm not used to showing my feelings. That's okay, he said. Just know that if you ever want someone to listen, I'm here. Her breath trembled slightly at the sincerity in his voice. Why do you care so much? He didn't answer right away. When he spoke, his tone was low and honest. Because you matter to me. Her heart fluttered wildly. She opened her mouth to speak, but the sound of loud footsteps interrupted them. The ranch manager rushed in. Elena, we have a problem at the south field. You need to come quickly. Her expression sharpened instantly. What happened? One of the cattle is trapped in the irrigation ditch. It's frightened and struggling. Without hesitation, Elena sprinted out the door, and Luke followed right behind her. When they reached the south field, several workers were already gathered. A young cow had fallen halfway into a narrow ditch. It wasn't deep, but the mud inside made it slippery, and the animal couldn't climb out on its own. It was panicking, kicking up mud and trying to free itself. Elena knelt beside the ditch. Easy, girl. Calm down. Luke crouched beside her. If she keeps fighting, she might injure her leg. The foreman added, We need to pull her out, but she's too scared. Elena looked at Luke. Can you help steady her while I check her leg? Of course. Without hesitation, Luke climbed down into the ditch. He moved slowly, speaking in a calm, low voice. It's okay. You're safe. We're right here. His soothing tone immediately began to calm the animal. Elena watched him, amazed at how naturally he gained the cow's trust. Once the animal settled, Elena carefully checked its leg. It's not broken, she said with relief. Just strained. We can help her up. Luke nodded. Let's do it. He guided the cow gently while the workers pulled from above. With a few strong efforts, the animal was lifted safely out of the ditch. Elena sighed with relief and stroked its neck. You're okay now, she whispered. Luke climbed out, covered in mud from head to toe. Elena couldn't help the soft laugh that slipped out. You're a mess, she said. He smiled back. But the cow is safe. Something about his simple answer made her chest feel full. The foreman shook his head. If you hadn't climbed in, she might have panicked more. Good work, both of you. Luke brushed mud from his clothes. Just doing what I can. Elena looked at him with gratitude glowing in her eyes. You always do more than you have to. His smile softened. Maybe that's because I have a reason to. Her heart skipped. Luke. But before she could finish, a gust of cold wind swept across the field. The workers began to head back, leaving Elena and Luke standing together in the fading daylight. Elena wrapped her arms around herself as the wind chilled her skin. Luke noticed immediately. You're cold, he said. Let's get you inside. Instead of answering, she simply walked beside him, feeling his quiet concern like a warm blanket. Back at the house, Elena stood by the fireplace trying to warm up. Luke stayed a few steps away, not wanting to intrude, but clearly waiting to make sure she was all right. The fire crackled softly. Shadows danced across the room. The warm light brushed gently across Luke's face, making his expression seem even softer. Elena, he said quietly, earlier, before we were interrupted, I want to finish what I was saying. She turned toward him slowly. I'm listening. He met her gaze with steady eyes. You asked why I care so much about you, he said. It's because you're the strongest person I've ever met, yet also the kindest. You carry the weight of this whole ranch, but you still care for every worker, every animal, every part of this land. And somewhere along the way, I began to care for you more than I expected. Elena felt her heart swell with emotion, gentle, warm, overwhelming in a soft way. Luke, she whispered, taking a slow breath. I feel something for you too. The crackling fire filled the silence between them. Luke's voice dropped to a soft, almost breathless tone. "I don't want to make things complicated for you. I know you have a lot to worry about." Elena shook her head. "You don't make things complicated. You make things lighter." Luke exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight he had carried for days. His eyes held hers, not with expectation, but with hope. They stood inches apart, the fire warming the space between them. Neither moved, neither needed to, because in that quiet, glowing room, they finally acknowledged the truth that had been quietly blooming between them from the very first day. They cared for each other, deeply, honestly. And for the first time in a long time, Elena felt a kind of peace in her heart, gentle, promising, and beautifully real. The days after Elena and Luke quietly admitted their feelings became some of the most meaningful days either of them had experienced in a long time. Their bond did not rush forward wildly. Instead, it grew gently, like a tree taking root, steady and strong. Every shared glance, every soft conversation, every simple moment between them added another layer of closeness neither had expected, but both had longed for without even realizing it. But life on the ranch never paused, even for feelings that were beginning to bloom. Winter approached faster than anyone expected. The winds grew colder, the skies turned more gray, and the nights stretched long. There was always something that needed fixing, something that needed checking, something that needed preparing before the true winter storms arrived. Elena pushed herself harder than ever. She wanted everything to be perfect. She wanted the workers safe, the animals well-fed, the equipment ready for cold mornings. But as much as she tried to hide it, Luke noticed the exhaustion in her eyes. One evening, while she stood inside the barn looking over a long list of tasks, Luke approached her with that calm, steady presence she had grown so comforted by. "You're worrying yourself sick," he said softly. Elena looked up, surprised. "I'm just planning for winter." "You're planning for winter," he repeated gently, "and for everyone's comfort, and everyone's safety, and every part of this ranch. But what about you?" She blinked, caught off guard by the question. No one had ever asked her that. She had always been the one thinking for everyone else. "I'm fine," she said, her voice a little too quick. Luke stepped closer. "You don't have to be fine all the time." His voice was gentle, not pushing, not demanding, just reminding her she was human, not a machine built to handle endless pressure. Elena looked down at the list in her hands. The paper shook slightly, and she realized it was her hands trembling, not the wind. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Not of the ranch, not of the winter, but of failing. Everyone believes I'm strong enough to handle this. What if I'm not?" Luke reached out and carefully took the paper from her trembling hands. He set it aside, then looked at her with eyes so full of sincerity that it made her chest ache with emotion. "Elena," he said softly, "strength doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means letting someone stand beside you." Her breath caught in her throat. "And you want to stand beside me?" "I do," he said, without a heartbeat of hesitation. "Not because the ranch needs it, not because you expect it, but because I want to." Something deep inside her cracked open. Something she had kept locked away for years. It was the heavy fear she carried about being unworthy, about being unable to build a future, about being unable to have a family. And for the first time, she felt safe enough to let a little of that fear rise to the surface. "Luke," she whispered, staring at the floor. "There's something you don't know about me." He waited, patient and steady, giving her every moment she needed. She took a shaky breath. "The doctors told me long ago that it would be very difficult for me to have children. Maybe impossible. I've carried that fear inside me for years. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to look at me differently. I didn't want you to change the way you feel." Luke stepped closer, so gently that she barely felt his footsteps in the hay. "Elena," he said, his voice warm as sunlight after rain. "Nothing you say could change the way I feel." She looked up, searching his eyes for any sign of pity or hesitation. There was none. Only warmth. Only care. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I've always feared being alone because of this." "You are not alone," he said firmly. "And what makes a family isn't just blood. It's love. It's care. It's the choices we make to stand by each other." Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from relief she never thought she would feel. Luke reached up and gently brushed a tear from her cheek with the back of his finger. The tender gesture made her heart feel like it was unfolding, layer by layer. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not turning away." "I never would," he answered with quiet certainty. The days moved slowly after that, carrying a new softness between them. Luke and Elena worked side by side often, sometimes speaking, sometimes quiet, but always aware of the other's presence. They grew closer in a way that felt natural, unforced, and deeply real. One morning, as the first snow fell lightly over the ranch, Elena and Luke walked along the north fence to check for weak points. Snowflakes settled on Elena's hair, and Luke gently brushed them off before she even realized it. "You're freezing," he said softly. "Let's take a break in the barn." Inside, the barn was warm from the heat lamps used for young calves. They sat on a bale of hay, close enough that their shoulders touched. The air between them felt peaceful. "Do you ever imagine your future?" Elena asked quietly. Luke smiled a little. "Sometimes. Not clearly. Just small pieces. A quiet home. A place where I belong. Maybe a few horses. Peace." "And someone to share it with?" she asked, her voice even softer. He turned toward her fully. "Yes," he said. "Someone to share it with." She felt her breath catch. "And do you think you could belong here? On this ranch? With me?" Luke reached for her hand, carefully, gently, like it was the most fragile thing in the world. His rough, warm fingers curled around hers. "Elena," he whispered, "this ranch already feels like home. And being with you feels like exactly where I'm meant to be." Her heart felt full, too full, overflowing with emotions she had kept locked away for far too long. She squeezed his hand. "I want you here," she whispered. "Not just for the ranch, for me." Luke's eyes softened with a warmth that made the cold winter seem distant. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. As weeks passed, their relationship deepened in small, meaningful ways. They shared meals. They took care of the horses together. They walked along the snow-covered fields discussing hopes and dreams. They stood together during hard moments, laughed together during light ones, and healed quietly in each other's presence. The workers noticed the closeness, but never said a word. They simply smiled when they passed the pair walking side by side. One evening, after a long day preparing for a heavy snowfall, Luke walked Elena to the porch. The sky was filled with soft, glowing stars, and the ranch lay quiet under a blanket of pale snow. Luke stopped beside her and turned softly. "Elena," he said, "there's something I want to tell you." She looked up, her heart calm and open. "What is it?" "When I first came here, I thought this job would be like every other. Temporary. Just another place along the road." He took her hands gently. "But being here, being with you, it made me realize I don't want to keep wandering. I want a place to belong, a place to stay, and I want that place to be here, with you." Warm tears filled Elena's eyes again, but this time they were tears of hope, not sorrow. "And I want you here," she said softly. "I want you to stay, not because the ranch needs you, but because I do." Luke smiled, a warm, deep smile that reached his eyes. "Then I'll stay," he said simply. They stood together on the quiet porch, hands entwined, hearts steady, the cold wind brushing gently around them. The ranch stretched silently under the night sky, and for the first time in years, Elena felt whole, not because she had everything she thought she needed, but because she finally had someone who saw her, understood her, and chose her. Luke had come into her life during a time of drought, when the land was dry, the well was empty, and her heart felt even emptier. Now, like the restored water flowing strong beneath the ranch, something new flowed through her life. Hope, peace, connection, and a love that grew slowly and honestly, like the steady heartbeat of the land she had always cherished. Their story wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't filled with grand gestures or glittering promises. It was simple, real, and deep, built from trust, gentle moments, and the quiet courage of two hearts choosing each other every single day. And as the winter snow fell softly around them, Elena knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her life was no longer defined by the fears that once held her. She had found someone who accepted her past, supported her present, and looked toward the future with her, not with expectations, but with hope. And that was more than she ever believed she would have. It was enough to finally let her heart rest, enough to begin again, enough to love fully and fearlessly.